Hi everyone, welcome back. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Benjamin. After my wife passed away, my daughter, Pamela, hated and resented me. She believed I got over her mother's death too quickly and didn't love her mother the way she thought I did. I couldn't defend myself without sounding like I was making excuses. But everything changed the day she found a journal that flipped her entire view of me and her mother's death on its head. I married my college sweetheart, Pamela's mom, many years ago. Back then, life was simpler. We were both students, young and full of dreams. I met her through a mutual friend during a college event. She wasn't even in my department. She was studying something entirely different. But from that very first conversation, something just clicked between us. We didn't let school get in the way of what we had. In fact, we worked around it. We made time for each other, even with our different schedules. We were intentional about staying close. By the time we graduated, I had already started working. I was stable enough to make a home and start a family. So we got married. It was just a simple, intimate ceremony with the people that mattered. Not long after the wedding, she told me she was pregnant. When she said it, I just pulled her into a hug and whispered, "We're ready." That baby would become our only child, Pamela. From the moment she was born, we poured everything into her. There was no guessing how much we loved that little girl. She was the light in our home, and raising her together brought my wife and me even closer. Looking at things now, I don't think anyone, including us, could have imagined the kind of road we'd end up walking. Life doesn't always unfold the way you plan it. And as much as we tried to build something solid and joyful, there were things we just couldn't control. As Pamela turned 4, we started to talk more seriously about having another child. We both thought it would be good for her to have someone to grow up with. At first, it was an exciting thought. We paid more attention to dates, diet, and little signs here and there. But a few weeks in, my wife started feeling strange. She was constantly tired, and she complained of discomfort in her throat. We thought maybe it was just a bug or a seasonal thing. Still, to be safe, we went to the hospital to get her checked out. We were thinking the doctor would come in and confirm what we were already guessing, pregnancy. But that's not what happened. The doctor came in with that look that lets you know the news is bad before a single word is said. He told us they'd found a cancerous cell growing in her throat. A delicate, hard-to-reach area. I could feel my chest tighten as I looked at my wife and saw her eyes widen, then go blank. They suggested surgery to remove the cancerous tissue and a long period of recovery and monitoring. We agreed almost immediately. There wasn't any choice to be made, really. We had a daughter to think about, a life we were still building. The surgery was scheduled quickly, and thank God, it went well. The doctors were confident they'd removed all of it and assured us the cancer hadn't spread to her lungs or other nearby areas. That gave us a little hope to hold on to. Recovery wasn't easy, but my wife was strong. Stronger than I think I'll ever be. She took the pain quietly, never complaining in front of Pamela, always smiling for her. The doctors advised that she come in regularly for checkups to make sure the cancer didn't return. It became part of our routine. We stopped talking about having another child. She was the one who brought it up first. I didn't argue because I understood. Why risk bringing more life into a situation already so delicate? Pamela was our world, and after coming so close to losing her mother, I couldn't imagine going through that fear again. So we poured everything into raising her together, quietly grateful that we still had each other. For 2 full years after my wife's surgery, it felt like we finally won. She looked better and felt better. And every time we went in for a checkup, the doctors gave us good news. No sign of the cancer spreading. After everything we'd been through, just hearing that gave us a kind of peace we hadn't felt in a long time. She started doing things she had stopped doing when she got sick. I didn't even realize how much I missed hearing her sing until it came back. It made the house feel alive again. She smiled more. Once the doctors cleared her, I sat down with my boss and asked to cut back on hours. I wasn't trying to climb any ladder at that point. I just wanted to be present. We used that time to travel as a family. I remember this one trip we took to a cabin by the lake. We spent the whole day fishing. At night, we sat by the fire, telling stories and laughing. I treasure every second of that time. It was the kind of peace you don't realize you're in until it's gone. We were happy. I had no idea then that it would be the last calm stretch we'd have as a family. That's the thing about life. You rarely know when you're in the good part until it becomes a memory. When Pamela turned 10, the cancer returned, and it didn't come quietly. It was aggressive. We went from thinking we had moved past the worst to being told my wife needed to be hospitalized for a much longer period than before. At first, I tried to stay hopeful. I told myself we'd fought it once, and we'd fight it again. But her body wasn't as strong, and the treatments were harsher. That year stretched me in ways I didn't think were humanly possible. I was trying to be everything at once: her husband, her nurse, our daughter's father, and somehow still an employee keeping his job. I would go from long hours at the hospital straight to late nights helping Pamela with schoolwork. Sometimes I'd sneak away just to cry where Pamela wouldn't see me. I couldn't fall apart in front of her. She needed one of us to hold it together, and since her mother couldn't anymore, it had to be me. But the truth is, I was crumbling inside. Watching the woman I built my life with fade away bit by bit hollowed me out. I saw her lose weight, lose energy, and lose her voice on some days. She never lost her kindness, though. Even when she could barely lift her head, she'd still ask me how I was holding up or remind me to eat something. That's the kind of woman she was. After almost a year of fighting, she was gone. Just like that, my world went dark. There's no other way to put it. I didn't care about work, food, or sleep. If Pamela hadn't been there, I don't know what I would have done. She was the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. Her presence, her eyes that looked so much like her mother's, were the only reason I got out of bed in the morning. Even though she was hurting too, and badly, I had to find a way to stand up for both of us. My wife wasn't just someone I married. She was everything I ever prayed for in a partner. Gentle but fierce. Smart but full of warmth. We didn't always agree on everything, but we always found our way back to understanding. She was my home. Losing her felt like having the roof torn off during a storm and still being expected to live like nothing changed. Pamela was devastated. The bond between her and her mother was something special. They were like best friends. I could see the loss carved in her. And even though she didn't say much at first, her silence spoke volumes. I knew she felt like the world had cheated her. I wore this mask of strength and kept things going, even when I felt like I was moving through fog. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It was about a year and some months after I lost my wife when I finally admitted to myself that I had to start rebuilding, not just for my sake, but for Pamela's too. The house felt like a time capsule. Her scent still lingered in our bedroom. Her favorite scarf hung behind the door where she always left it. Some mornings, I'd find myself standing in front of her closet, holding her sweater, just stuck in that in-between space of remembering and refusing to let go. But I realized that holding on to all her things wasn't helping me heal. It was just helping me stay frozen in grief. So, one weekend, I decided to begin decluttering. I didn't throw things away carelessly. I folded her clothes gently, packed them into boxes with care, and kept the ones that held the most memories. I wasn't erasing her. I was trying to breathe again. While I was going through this quiet rebuilding phase, I wasn't completely alone. Her family stayed in touch and checked in regularly, and so did mine. The support helped more than I admitted out loud. But the one person who truly made a difference was her close friend, Angela. She wasn't just some outsider who showed up after the funeral. She had been around during the hard parts. When my wife was first hospitalized, Angela would stop by, sometimes unannounced, just to drop off food or sit with Pamela if I had to rush to the hospital. After my wife passed, she didn't disappear like many others did. She showed up, consistently. She'd cook dinner when I worked late, clean up around the house, and make sure Pamela had someone to talk to, especially on days when I was too drained to speak. Angela had always been dependable. Even before my wife got sick, she was someone we trusted. But after the loss, her presence became more than just helpful. It was a kind of quiet comfort. She didn't push, didn't pry. She simply stepped in when things were falling apart and did what needed to be done. I appreciated her more than words could express at the time, but I also didn't know how complicated that appreciation would eventually become, for me, for Pamela, and for the peace I thought I was starting to find. At first, Pamela was okay with her mother's friend being around. She helped out whenever I had long work shifts. To be honest, I thought it was a good arrangement. Pamela never complained. She seemed to accept it, or at least tolerate it. But everything shifted the moment she picked up on something deeper, growing, between me and that friend. It wasn't anything serious at the time, just comfort, understanding, a shared grief that slowly turned into companionship. But Pamela saw it differently. In her eyes, it was a betrayal. To her, it felt like I had thrown her mother's memory aside and replaced it too quickly. Her mood changed. She became quiet at dinner, avoiding eye contact and brushing off conversations with short answers. I figured it was just teenage stuff that I didn't think would last. I thought if I gave her space, she'd come around. But that silence didn't soften. It hardened over the years. It grew into coldness, sarcastic remarks, and then full-blown resentment. Anytime Angela, my wife's friend, came around, Pamela disappeared into her room. She stopped sitting with me in the living room like she used to. The warmth between us slowly faded into this tense, uncomfortable distance. I tried to talk to her more than once. Sat her down gently. Tried to explain that I wasn't trying to replace her mom, that I still missed her every day, that no one could ever fill that space. But Pamela wasn't hearing any of it. She cut me off mid-sentence and said something I'll never forget. "You never really loved Mom, did you? Because if you did, you wouldn't be with her friend like it means nothing." That hit me deep. I opened my mouth to explain again, but she just shook her head and walked out. Slammed the door. And after that, I stopped trying for a while. When she got admission into the university, she didn't just accept it. She grabbed it like a lifeline. Moved out the moment she could. It felt like she couldn't wait to put distance between us. After that, our relationship turned into nothing more than technical check-ins. She only called when she needed something. I gave her space, but I won't lie, it hurt. It felt like I had lost both my wife and my daughter. It was during Pamela's final year at university when everything changed between us. One quiet evening, I had just gotten back home to find her sitting in the living room, shoulders slumped, eyes distant. As soon as she saw me, she stood up and walked over slowly. I barely had time to say a word before she wrapped her arms around me in the tightest hug I'd felt from her in years. She held on like she was afraid I'd disappear. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking over and over. I was frozen for a second, confused, caught off guard. For years, she'd barely spoken to me unless it was necessary. We lived like polite strangers. Now here she was, crying into my shirt, and all I could do was hold her. When she finally pulled back, she looked up at me with red, teary eyes and said, "Dad, I read Mom's journal." I hadn't seen that journal since the time I packed away her mother's things. I remember Pamela had been so quiet back then, just watching me from her bedroom door as I boxed everything up. I didn't know she had taken anything, but now she admitted she had held on to a few of her mom's things, keepsakes, memories. The journal was among them. She said she hadn't been ready to read it all these years. She tucked it away, afraid it would rip open the wounds she worked so hard to ignore. But something pushed her to open it the night before. She said reading it changed everything. Her mother hadn't just written about her illness or her pain. She wrote about us. About the nights she cried, and I held her. About how scared she was of dying, not because of death itself, but because she'd be leaving Pamela behind. She wrote about watching Pamela sleep, wondering if she'd remember the sound of her voice. And then there were the parts where she talked about me, how she leaned on me more than I ever knew, how much she appreciated that I stayed strong when she felt like falling apart. She thanked me, even in her last entries, for loving her the way I did, for being there. But what really broke Pamela, the part that made her crumble, was a specific entry. Her mother wrote, "If you're reading this, promise me you won't close yourself off. I want you to find peace. even love if it comes. You gave me everything. Don't spend the rest of your life drowning in grief." Pamela admitted she hadn't been ready to hear that back then. She had been so angry, convinced I had moved on too fast. But now, reading those words with grown eyes, with an adult mind, she saw me differently. She understood that I had been grieving, just not in the way she needed me to. I had to be strong for her. I had to keep life moving while carrying pain in silence. She told me something else that caught me completely off guard. In one of the entries, her mom mentioned speaking to her close friend, Angela, the same woman who had been helping us, the one Pamela resented me for growing close to. Her mom had asked that friend to look after both of us. She trusted her. She believed that if anyone could be there for us, it would be her. She even hinted that if life brought us together, she wouldn't be angry. She'd be at peace. I stood there stunned. My wife had never told me that part. All she ever said was, "She'll be there for you and Pamela when I'm gone." I didn't read anything more into it at the time. But now, it felt like a piece of the puzzle had been sitting there, waiting for the right moment to fall into place. Pamela hugged me again, and this time she just held on in silence. She said she was sorry for all the years she pulled away, for judging me without knowing the full story. And then she thanked me. She thanked me for not giving up on her, for never raising my voice, for letting her take her time, even when it hurt. In that moment, I told her the truth, that I had held off on anything serious with anyone, not because I didn't want companionship, but because her silence, her anger, always sat heavy on my chest. I didn't want to add another wedge between us. I respected her too much for that. I was just trying to get through each day the best I could. And then she told me I deserved happiness, that she understood what her mom wanted, that she would be happy knowing I was finally at peace, even if it meant letting someone else into my life. That was the first time in a long time I felt a real sense of peace in my chest, a quietness I hadn't known since her mother passed. But more than anything, what mattered most wasn't permission to move forward. It was having my daughter back. That embrace, that forgiveness, that understanding. It meant more to me than any relationship could ever offer. Because it meant the walls between us had come down. It meant she saw me again, not as someone who failed her or forgot her mother, but as the man who carried it all in silence just to make sure she was okay. We sat there for a while that evening, not saying much. The pain hadn't vanished, but the weight had lifted. And as I looked at her, my little girl who had grown into a woman with her own strength, I knew her mother would have been proud. That was the closure I needed. Not just to grieve my wife, but to heal with my daughter. And that, more than anything, was what I'd been hoping for all along.